Hi, everybody. My name is Sandy Beach, and I'm an alcoholic. How you all doing tonight? Well, it's great to see everybody here tonight, and there's a lot of enthusiasm in the room, and that's how I remember my early AA. We had a Saturday night meeting up in Washington, over in the Virginia side. The old man, Buck Doyle, ran, and we could hardly wait to get there. We just knew ahead of time we were going to have a good time. And when you have that attitude, you're going to have a good time. That's just no matter what happens. And I can feel that here at this meeting. And the reason we're having a good time is that we're hearing good news. That's what we're hearing. That's what you hear in AA. It's good news. The bad news is when you don't come to AA. Then you hear the bad news over at the bar. When the police comes in and says, "Hi, time to leave." And the good news is what we're talking about in these 12 steps. That this hellhole that we've been living in for all those years, the doors are going to open, and we're going to be let out, and we can see it in other people, so we start to believe it. And that's what meetings are for. They call AA the biggest show and tell operation in the world. It's also the biggest lost and found department. Because we were all lost and now we're found. But it takes the example of others, and that's what the meetings are for, is to enable those of you that are new. I met a young man tonight who's fairly new, and I welcomed him, and I hope that he finds this great enthusiasm and this new way of life to replace that hellhole that we were all in. I think I've said every week that the point of this meeting is to have fun. We're here, that God's will for us is to be happy, joyous, and free. When we first come here, that sounds impossible, because the only way we knew how to get happy, joyous, and free was through drinking. And then someone said, okay, no more drinking, and we assumed we'd never be happy, joyous, and free again in our lives, because that was our only way of getting there. That was the only power that was able to overcome our perspective on the world that was so depressing, and it was the only power that was there to enable us to feel equal to other people and to not feel different. And so we knew that anytime somebody said that we're not going to be doing any drinking, that we were going to be stuck with this feeling that we've had ever since we were little, that we really didn't belong, and there was something wrong with us, there was something wrong with the world, it didn't make any sense, and alcohol seemed to answer that problem. And that's what made us alcoholics. We've said this many times, it isn't what alcohol does to us that makes us alcoholics, it's what it does for us. And if alcohol did for non-alcoholics what it did for alcoholics, they would drink as much as we did. But it doesn't do that for non-alcoholics. They drink, and you don't hear them saying, yeah, I had some wine yesterday. You know, it's the secret of life. You don't hear them saying that. You don't hear them say, I would puke blood for a month just to have another drink. You don't hear them saying that. You hear them say stuff like, yeah, I love that kind of wine. It makes meat taste better. And I like this kind of wine. It makes fish taste better. And those of us that did some serious drinking are wondering to ourselves, is that going down or coming up? And when you... So alcohol did something for us that it doesn't do for non-alcoholics, and that's why we were willing to sacrifice our lives for it. And of course, on the outside, people would wonder, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? And it takes a long time for them to understand that something was happening inside of us that was very magic and powerful, and it was taking us to a place of safety and neutrality. It was taking us to a place where we could finally relax and be ourselves, and our creative nature could be released, and we could be free to express our own ideas and to actually have an identity. But as soon as the alcohol wore off, we were back trapped again, and then we got to AA. And that was the luckiest thing that happened to us. We got in here because there was no place else to go. And then we got here and we found people who were just like us, telling us that if we would follow this simple program, we could have a transformation that would enable us to see the world entirely different, and we would actually be happy to not be drinking on a Saturday night or a Sunday night. We would actually be happy that we're not drinking. And I found that hard to believe, but then the people that were telling me this, it was hard not to believe them because they had done the same thing. They hid the vodka in the back of the toilet. They had money hidden all over the place. They had all the same little lies and secrets, and I knew they weren't making them up, so I had to start believing them. So we hold this meeting so that we can have some fun. I find that in humor we drop our guard a little bit. We're willing to admit perhaps we're as stupid as the next person. And then we all admit we're kind of stupid when it comes to life, and then we start laughing about that, and then we're open to hearing some ideas, and maybe we can get rid of some of the old ideas that we brought in. And so the 12 steps are a game plan for living to replace the plan that you are currently using, and the reason that it is suggested is that your plan is awful. That's one of the main reasons. You spurt way ahead as soon as you stop following your own plan. Inertia will do better than your own plan for living. But our problem is we're very self-centered, and we thought up the plan, and we hate to, it's pride of authorship. We know we puke a lot, we're in jail, we got no money, nobody likes us. But I thought the plan up, and I think I'll stick with it. It's mine. I'm very familiar with it, and I hate to just let go of it just because it's stupid. And that's the power of our old ideas, to hold on, because in order to get rid of an old idea, we have to admit we're wrong, and this is incredibly difficult for many of us to do. I was willing to say that you were right, but I found it very hard to say that I was wrong. There seemed to be a quantum difference between the two. And so with that in mind, we'll start talking a little bit about step 9. We've been going through these steps. Anybody who's just here for the first time, AA has these 12 suggested principles, and in the foreword to our 12 and 12 it says these are a group of principles, spiritual in nature, which if followed as a way of life will enable the suffering alcoholic to escape from the obsession and to become happily and usefully whole. And that you'll find the word whole and you'll find the word useful used a lot throughout any spiritual program, because being of use is where happiness lies. It doesn't look like it would ever lie there. It looks like it would probably lie on a yacht. But that's not the way we're made. And we just, our instincts and everything about our intellect tells us, no, that's not going to make me happy. But then we're forced into doing it, and we find that happens here in AA. We're helping the next person, we're making some coffee, we're starting to do this, and we're doing that. And while we're engaged in those activities, we're about as happy as we've ever been. Well, why? I wonder why. Because we forgot about ourselves for a while. And that is the freedom that spirituality is offering to all of us, is the ability to get away from ourselves for a while and enjoy the freedom of just being part of something instead of trying to be the whole thing ourselves. And our 9th step is talking about making amends to other people. It's called clearing up the wreckage of the past. And it's very important to do that because as we get into the next step, that's our day at a time step. And we'll talk a lot about that next week. Of all the steps in the program, that has about as much meat as anything. And it really is how to live one day. And you'll notice in that step that it involves, when we're wrong, admitting it, which is like making an amend. It is straightening situations out a little faster than we have in the past. Most of us knew nothing about this in the past. We never inventoried, as we did in step 8, the harm we did others. We inventoried the harm that others did us. And we did that automatically, and we kept lists, hit lists, hate lists, resentment lists, get even lists. And that's how we saw other people. They're in our way. They're standing between me and my goals for my happiness. And if I could get you out of the way, maybe I could get what I'm entitled to, and then I could have happiness. And so it never dawned on us that making amends to other people and looking at the harm we do other people would benefit us. And it takes a long time to get rid of the intellectual plan we were living by and switch over into this spiritual mode. As we say many times, when you read the 12 steps, they will not make sense at all, because it is suggested that this is the solution to all the situations that you have in your life, and most of these situations involve sex, security, or a place in society. Money is a big one. And I remember when they told me that these steps, they're going to handle all of these problems that you have. I looked high and low for the money step because I figured we'd get that one. We get me about a $2,000 loan. I saw a lot of peace of mind coming. I saw the promises rushing in with as the guy's counting it out, 100, 200, 300, and I'm going, yes, sir. Fear of economic insecurity will leave us. But it's not there. There isn't one. And there's no step about getting promoted. There's no step about sexual relations. There's no step in any of these things. There's just a group of principles that we are suggested that we follow. So for most of us, all of us in AA, we were driven into doing this. We had an illness that was killing us. It was choking us to death. We were overpowered by life, and we finally, against our own better judgment, put up the white handkerchief and said, help. And this is the form of help that was offered. It isn't what we expected. I wasn't asking for spiritual help. I was just asking for regular help. And they said, sorry, the regular help is not available. The only help that's available is spiritual help. And we found that out very interestingly in the chapters of the agnostic, which we talked about back in step 2. And there's that wonderful line in there. It says, and this is not an exact quote, but it says something to the effect, if when you drink you can't control your drinking and it gets all out of control, and if when you try not to drink at all you are unable to, then you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Now, is that the strangest illness you've ever heard of? Do you think that's in the American Medical Association listing of illnesses? How many illnesses do you think are listed in that book under the category illnesses that only a spiritual experience can conquer? Not covered by Medicare, obviously. But that's the nature of our situation. We have an illness that only a spiritual experience can conquer. And I'm just going, whoa. And most of us go, well, I don't believe in spiritual experiences. Too bad, you're going to die. But there is hope. You could change your mind. I don't know. Guess I'm going to die. I've never changed my mind before. It's not my specialty. And so that's what we're left with, right in that step. Right in there, after they nailed us with being powerless over alcohol. And that, of course, is the doorway to all spiritual programs. When Bill Wilson quotes William James, who was an early book that the early Oxford movement group read, The Varieties of Religious Experience. And when you look in that, James, who was the father of psychology in the United States, had done an extensive study about spiritual experiences around the world, and they all had one thing in common. People were hitting a bottom real bad. People weren't having these things on a roll. You know what I mean? They were just having awful things happen in their lives to the point that they had to give up. They said, oh my God, this is awful. And they surrendered, and this spiritual experience occurred. It wasn't guaranteed for everybody going through something like that, but this is what they all had in common. And when the people came out the other side, there had been a huge personal, emotional readjustment, and their outlook on life had been transformed. And this is what our 12 steps are designed to do. We're not sentenced to just sit around struggling against the first drink for the rest of our lives, never being happy. That's what raw sobriety is. That's what's going on the wagon is. All you do is not drink. You don't change anything else. You just are a miserable, sober person. And you gently inflict that on everyone around you. You make sure they're aware of what you're going through, and you just don't like people smiling, and you don't like people having a good time. And if you're in a family, you can really operate there. You can just mess up events all over the place by just inflicting your misery on those around you. And then you wonder why nobody likes you. And so it takes a lot of power to solve the problem that we've been given as alcoholics, because our problem really wasn't alcohol. It was sobriety. That was the problem. Every time we were sober, it was awful. Every time we drank, it was great. And people keep saying, why don't you stop drinking? You go, you don't understand. When I stop drinking, that's when my problem starts. That's when I have all the stuff that alcohol fixes. And so the good news that we talked about in the very beginning, out of all these steps, is that this problem that alcohol fixed is going to be removed. And that's why it's so easy to stay sober, because there's nothing for alcohol to fix. And if there's nothing for alcohol to fix, then we don't think about it all the time. We're already comfortable, happy, joyous, and free. So those are the goals of our 12 steps. And as I said, we came in through the doorway of powerlessness. And every week we insist on just reviewing for 2 minutes or 1 minute how important that powerlessness is. Because failure to accept that 100% will ruin the rest of the program. And so if you have come here and you've said, well, yes, I may not be powerless over alcohol, but I've sure got a lot of problems with it, you've just sentenced yourself to awful sobriety. You probably won't even make it, because you didn't say, I'm powerless over alcohol. You said, I'm almost powerless. And as we say every week, almost being powerless over alcohol means you almost need a sponsor, you almost need these meetings, you almost do the steps, you almost need God, and all of that is like almost having a parachute. And almost having a parachute is not much, if you think about it. You know, I almost took one of those damn things. Now I'm flapping my arms like mad. Doesn't seem to be helping. So almost being powerless will avail us nothing. There's nothing going to happen. We won't have any of these spiritual changes take place until we surrender 100% in that first step and rule out the fact that we may be able to avoid the first drink on our own. That's what being powerless is. The powerlessness over alcohol occurs when there's no alcohol in our system. Sure, when we start drinking, then we go out of control and all kinds of trouble happen, but that's not the core problem. The core problem is when we're sober and we know that if we take a drink, all this stuff is going to happen, we still take the drink. We're powerless over taking the drink when we have all of our faculties. It's been explained that we're alcoholic. If we drink again, we're going to die. Our family's going to leave us. The boss said, one more drink and you're fired. The husband and the wife said, one more drink and you're out of here. And we're telling our friends this. We met him for lunch over in the bar and said, I'm an alcoholic. I went through treatment. They told him if I ever drink again, liver damage, I might only live can I have a beer? I might only live a couple of months. And also, my boss, thanks. And my boss said that if I, oh boy, and here we are. We know all of this information and we're powerless over taking the first drink. And then next week we'll talk about what we have in Alcoholics Anonymous is a daily reprieve contingent on our spiritual condition. As long as we put an effort in to maintaining the spiritual energy that we achieve through the 12 steps, the alcohol problem will not bother us on a day-to-day basis for year after year after year after year. This is one of the promises of Alcoholics Anonymous. If we will maintain this condition, we will be free from this problem. And then we find out that we can be free from other problems. We can be free from resentment, from anger. We can be free from all of these things that we start inventorying in the 4th step and share in the 5th step. So here we have to change our mind when we finally see this powerlessness. Get rid of childhood ideas about God that we may have gotten in different churches, and it may not have been the church's fault. It may have been we didn't hear it right. We're sitting there, 6 years old. I heard some weird things when I was sitting there. My sister was sitting right next to me, and she heard beautiful things. And she still loves that church and goes there and is just so thrilled with it. And I found it terrified me to death, and I used to faint. I'd be sitting in there. I remember one day, we just have different ways of looking at things. I remember I was sitting there probably 8 or 9 years old. I'd listened to all this stuff that was going on. A lot of it was in Latin. And I looked up at the crucifix one day, and it hit me. It was almost like God spoke to me. I saw the truth in the crucifix. And what it was, you see, son, this is what God did to his only son who he loved. Guess what he's going to do to you? Boom. I just went out, and people said, what happened to him? He had an awareness that's way beyond the rest of us. So these childhood ideas that have availed us nothing for all our lives anyway, we get to get rid of. And we get to throw them out, develop an open mind as we come to believe in this new power. And AA doesn't have a definition of a power. There is no God, it's Alcoholics Anonymous God. It says God as you understand Him. And so AA doesn't attempt to explain any historical higher power to you. What we are experts at is convincing you of the need for a higher power. That's our job. We just are showing you, and we start by showing you that sentence in the chapter of the agnostic, that you may have an illness that only a spiritual experience can conquer. So if that is your situation, then it might be prudent to change your mind about spirituality and try these steps. Now you see, you don't give up being in charge of this, even though it looks like you're surrendering. You're in charge of evaluating the results that you get. So I would suggest about every 3 months, just get real honest with yourself and say, is this going better or worse than my plan? And just look at it as you go to these stupid meetings that don't make any sense, as you do these steps that really obviously don't make any sense, as you start praying words you don't believe in, talking to a higher power that doesn't exist, doing all these things that, you're just going, all right, I'll do it, but, And then you see an endless series of coincidences start happening. You start feeling happier. You're much more comfortable. People start being nice. Your family straightens out. Life starts making sense. And you start saying to yourself, I wonder if I am having some kind of a spiritual change. And the answer is yes. That's what's happening. That's what it feels like. Probably the first clue that a huge miracle is taking place in your life will occur somewhere in the 2 to 3 month range in a lot of people, and you'll be sitting around just maybe watching a football game or just sitting at home reading the paper or something, and all of a sudden you'll say to yourself, wow, I forgot to worry about drinking last week. Now just think about that. You forgot to worry about drinking last week? When's the last time you went a whole week without thinking about drinking? This is a miracle. That's what sobriety in AA is. It is, you forget to think about drinking. It never comes into your head to torture you. It is lifted away. That's what a spiritual solution is. It's not figured out. You don't know why you're not thinking about drinking. You just know that it happened. You don't know any more about why you're an alcoholic. You don't even care anymore because it's not bothering you anymore. So this is what's in store for us as we start through this path, coming into finding out that we have to make our slogan, first things first. We want to make spiritual part of our lives move up from the unknown all the way to being first in our lives. Apply the spiritual solution first and see if there's anything left to be worked on with your other ways of working at problems. And so this is done in our third step when we make a decision to turn our will in our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And this is a decision to do all the work that's encompassed in the rest of the steps so that this can happen. And basically we're trying to become unself-centered and become God-centered. That's the point of all this work. Because self-centeredness is the torture chamber that anyone lives in who remains self-centered. It's hard to get out of being self-centered without using a higher power. Well, I think we just kid ourselves when we go, well, I understand self-centeredness is my problem, so I will change it. Well, who's changing it? I mean, and as we stay there in the self-centered mode, we look at everything from a perspective of self-centeredness. Okay, I'm in the center of the world. I have to take care of myself. It's me against them. You know how it looks when you're self-centered? And it's the wrong perspective. So we see people incorrectly. We see them as threats, and we see them as obstacles. And then we come in here and we go, look, that's the wrong place to look at it. That's not the true center. The true center of everything is God. So if we can make you a God-centered person, because deep down inside of you, as our big book suggests, the fundamental idea of God was born there, just like the idea of a friend. And if you can acknowledge this and use these steps to remove the obstacles that are blocking you from an awareness of this inner higher power, you will then realize that this is the true center of your nature, that your spirituality, which has been totally undeveloped, it has been totally ignored for all our lives, but it's there. It is the part of us that couldn't stand the fact that we were alcoholics. It's the part of us that made us think about suicide. It's the part of us that wanted to be a good mother and a good father. We wanted to be a good citizen. We wanted to be all these things. Well, what is that in us that wanted to be other than what we were? It must be a good part of us. It must be something that's worth going in and looking at. Because there is inside of you, even if you just got here a week ago, you know there's something inside of you that's very valuable, that's good, but you don't know how to get in there and get it. And you've been living with this disease which forces us to behave in ways that we're ashamed of, and we feel that we're bad people. And we aren't. We're just sick people. And we're going to get well, and we're going to get the answer through these 12 steps. So we find out that human beings were born with instinctual drives that cause these character defects if they get out of control. These drives are absolutely necessary for us to function as human beings. We wouldn't reproduce, so we have this sexual drive and this security. We all want to have some form of security, and we want to have a place in society. We're social beings. We weren't meant to isolate like all of us alcoholics did. We're not supposed to spend Saturday afternoon sitting in our bedroom thinking about things. Oh, I don't know. Maybe I ought to go out. No, I don't want to go out. It might be bad out there. Maybe I'll stay here. And so this was against our nature. And so we have all these energies that are going around and around. And until we get into a spiritual way of life, our intellect tells us that we're going to have to somehow meet the demands of all these instinctual drives, because that's the only obvious answer. They're not going to go away. So the only way I can have peace of mind is to meet these demands. And that's what television and all the advertising and materialistic society will tell us is, you got to get a new car, and then you'll feel better. No, don't do that. Drink this. No, don't do that. Don't drink that. Come over here and go to Bermuda. You'll finally be whole. Go to Bermuda. Go to Bermuda. So we sell the car, go to Bermuda, and then we go, I wish I had the car. I don't like Bermuda. And we come back and we're going, people keep telling me all these other answers that are going to make me feel better. And we come in here and we're told we're not going to get anything. The funny thing about spiritual growth, it consists of getting rid of things rather than getting anything. So it turns out that everything that we want to be, we already are. It's just a question of getting in there so we can see it. This is magnificent, what's born inside of us. The question is how to get in touch with us so that this can be the centerpiece of our lives rather than our ego-driven desires for all these things to make us happy. And so we learned in step 6 and 7, especially in the humility step, that it's possible to reduce the demands. That's what the spiritual solution is. To bring them back down to where they're supposed to be, so they're simply supplying us energy so that we can go about doing God's will. And when these demands are reduced down to the level that they're supposed to be at, they no longer control our lives and we have freedom. So we run into that paradox that the more dependent we become on a higher power, the more independent we actually are. That's how we achieve total independence, is by being dependent on God. Because once we do that, these instinctual demands are driven down, so they're no longer controlling us, and we're free. Up until then, we're not independent at all. We're being jerked around by our character defects. And only we think we're independent. Well, I'm going to stay at work this afternoon and do a good job. And lust says, why don't you leave at 2? I got a surprise for you. You know, and then we get fired, or we don't get promoted, or something like that. And the boss said, geez, couldn't you just stay here? No, I was just being independent. I was being the real me. We weren't free at all. We were totally being controlled by these drives and by these character defects. And so there's a method to the madness behind all of these steps. And it's all working to our advantage. It's not some hassle, the initiation that we're pushed through. It is a wonderful plan, very practical. Spirituality is incredibly practical. And what it brings us is emotional balance and enables us to not engage in so many stupid activities that we have to apologize for later on. So we did the inventory in step 4 and saw that these instinctual demands were totally out of control, causing us to do a lot of things that we thought ought to never be shared with anyone else till after we die. And then we get to step 5 and it says, no, we're not going to wait till you die. We want you to share them now. With yourself, with God, and another human being. So we finally got up the courage, went and talked to someone, and bared our entire soul for the first time. It's one of the great principles of all spiritual programs, is this idea of being totally honest with someone else. And then we find that when we do that, we're able to see the truth about ourselves for the first time. One of the things we learn is it's impossible to see the truth about ourselves alone, and that people of very high spiritual development always insist on checking with others the guidance that they feel they are getting. And so checking with others becomes a way of life. And we just do that as an advantage. It's just this wonderful way of being able to achieve happiness and to get the truth. And so this becomes a pattern of life. We start out with sponsors, and then they become friends, and then we sponsor people, and those people become friends, and we interchange sharing back and forth on a daily basis. And we benefit from it. We don't get running into those dead ends of self-centered views on things that caused us so much trouble in the past. So when we finally get through that step, and then we come to those middle steps of 6 and 7, where we suddenly realize that this is a lot more than we bargained for. We thought we were going to come in here and just stop drinking. And I think I told you that my sponsor said, well, after a month of sobriety, he said, well, you haven't been drinking for a month, and I really think that you ought to stop embezzling at work. And I was just, it wasn't embezzling, I was borrowing. But the Marine Corps didn't know that there was this loan being made. And I said, where does it say that? I thought this was Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't see anything about Embezzlers Anonymous. But he convinced me that it would be in my best interest to put the money back and to never do it again. And okay. So now I knew that in order to stay in AA, you had to not drink and not embezzle. So another month goes by, and he's going, well, if you're going to have a good marriage, if you really want to be a good father, you got to stop having affairs. I'm going, where does it say affairs? Is this Affairs Anonymous or what? I mean, what is this? So then, okay, all right, I understand that. All right. So I'm cleaning up my act. He had something every month. I mean, it just went on. Sometimes there was one a week. Hey, I got another one. And it suddenly dawned on me that AA was a 2-step program. Don't drink and change everything there is about you. And that's what was involved, was we need to take a look at ourselves. We got to take a total look. And I'm going, that's a lot more than I thought this was about. And that's what steps 6 and 7 are all about. We're entirely ready to have God remove all of our defects of character, which, as we talked about earlier, would render us saints. And I didn't come here to become a saint. I just came here to get the people off my back. And besides, nobody's ever had all their character defects removed, so what's the joke? And they said, it's not a joke. It really, you could get entirely willing, as you were with your drinking, God would proceed to remove these defects. The problem is, the other defects aren't as fatal as alcohol is. And they offer us a lot of pleasure. And so we settle for half measures in the other character defect area. We decide to become a little more honest than we've been in the past. And we'll try to control lust. And we'll only gossip when it's useful. And I'm going to give up most anger, but I'll just keep justifiable anger. That's what I'll keep. And I know pride's bad, but what I'm going to get rid of is false pride, and I'm going to keep good pride. And so I just went through the whole list and settled for some intermediate objective. That was my plan. And then when I got into step 6 and said, no, there's no plan for halfway. You can't go ask God to make you semi-honest. God, please help me be honest most of the time, except when I need to screw somebody in business, and I would like to retain the option, because there's this great self-centered fear that if these character defects were actually removed, we wouldn't be able to fend for ourselves. You know what I'm saying? We got to keep a little greed, or who's going to look out for me? And so this is the great struggle that goes on for the rest of our lives, trying to become more willing to get rid of these different defects. And of course, as time goes on, we realize that everything's reversed, and it's my job is not to take care of me. My job is to be useful to God and to do what His will is. It's God's job to take care of me. I never realized that. And besides, I couldn't trust Him. I never trusted anybody on the planet. And so it was a very difficult procedure to go through. But He certainly took care of my alcohol problem, and AA certainly took care of me, and my life keeps improving the more I struggle. And that's what the step 6 and 7 are. It's a tremendous struggle to overcome the fear of not taking care of ourselves. I'm going to have to take care of this. I'm going to have to do that. And as soon as I say that, then I'm going to have to step on God's children's toes in order to get there. And I'm going to have to behave in a selfish way. I'm going to have to not be in harmony with the people around me. And then it causes all kinds of problems, and I'm not happy, and I go, why am I doing this? And the answer is because I'm human. And we never really get beyond that, but we have to keep trying. That's all that's asked in step 6 and 7, is that we keep trying. And not only is it such a lofty goal that we never dreamed of shooting for before, but we find out in step 7 that we have to humbly ask to have these defects removed, and that's going to involve pain. And pain was not a favorite word of mine. It was right up there with work. Just like, whoa. But then we changed our attitude about pain. We found out that this type of pain was kind of like the pain of working out. Remember how painful it was when you first start getting in shape? But then you start getting results. And then it's a lot easier. You go over to the gym, put in about 30 minutes. Matter of fact, you start enjoying it. And you reclassify it. It's no longer pain, it's effort. And it's just, I like expending that effort in a direction that brings results. And the same thing happens in a spiritual program. Because the pain that we're experiencing is moving from self-centeredness to God-centeredness. Not getting our way is what I said most of the time. That's the only problem that really exists, is not getting my way, and then I'm going to suddenly not have a way and simply try to live by God's way. Then we talked last week about making a list of all people we had harmed, and we talked about what harm was and how important it was, not just to make this list because our sponsor said we had to make it, but to understand how it's going to benefit us, to understand that we actually went out and created a lot of harm in other people. We kept them off balance. We withheld attention. We tried to control the situation. We told stories behind their back. We were always trying to work ourselves ahead and put people down. And they retaliated. And we, as the 12 and 12 talks about, had the skill of bringing out the very worst in everyone. And when we bring out the worst in people, that's what we see wherever we go. People at their worst. And we come home at night going, man, this world is filled with jerks. And little do we know they're only jerks when we're around. That they're wonderful as soon as we leave. And so this making a list and seeing what the harm is that we bring, where's the disharmony that I bring on a daily basis, enables us to stop doing that, to see it for what it is, and then we can start going out and behaving in a different fashion. And then as we get to the step tonight, which is, conceptually, it's a fairly easy step. May direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And I want to just tell you this story. I've been sober about probably 20 years. And I was living up in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill. And I was sitting around my living room one night, had a nice little townhouse, very happy guy. And I thought about, just it came up into my head. Oh, in 1954, before you borrowed $70 from Bill Marseille when the two of you were in flight school because you drank up all your money and you didn't have the rent money for your apartment that you and your wife had. And you have forgotten about it for all these years. And I went, what did that have to come up here on a Saturday afternoon for? Because I knew, I've been around the program long enough, you just don't get rid of that one. And I'm going, Bill Marseille, $70. Where the hell am I going to find Bill Marseille? I don't know. I haven't talked to him. I have no idea where he is. Well, you could try. Well, how? How could I try? What am I going to do? Just start calling? That was before the internet was around. What am I going to do? Call every damn operator? Hello, you got a Bill Marseille? You got a Bill? Well, you remember, this is me and me. This conversation's going on between. It was like my sponsor was there inside my head. You know, there was me going, look, I'm watching a football game. I'll deal with Bill Marseille later. No, you won't. We're going to talk about him now. All right. You know he liked to ski. Call the states where they ski. Well, I don't know any states where they ski except Vermont. I'm from New England. I don't know about what I would miss. You know, maybe Colorado. Okay, that was a good guess. They said, well, call Vermont. All right, here's the deal. I'll call Vermont. If he ain't there, I'm watching the game. All right? Over the information. Da, 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 da. Hello, operator. Yeah, listen, in the state of Vermont, do you have a William P. Marseille III? You do? Wow. Hey, Bill, hi, Sandy Beach. Hi, hey, how are you? What are you doing? Well, I'm running the ski resort up here. I have a gift shop. Well, Bill, let me tell you why I'm calling. You remember 1954? Yeah, I remember we partied and did all that. Well, I borrowed $70 from you, and then you got transferred, and I just kept it. I said, well, the hell with him. And I joined AA about 20 years ago, and whenever we find these amends from the past, we have to go make them. And he said, no kidding, you joined? Yeah, I did. He said, well, I remember, you're a pretty bad drunk, there's no doubt about that. So I said, look, I want to send you the money. He says, well, how is it? Oh, great. I can't tell you what it's done for me. It's the greatest damn thing. My life is, I started telling him all the things and wonders. And so I sent him the $70. And got about a month later, I get a box from his gift shop. Must have had $200 worth of stuff in it. You know, wind chimes and all these things and a letter. And then he called me up and he said, I'm moving to North Carolina and keep my address. Maybe we can get together. And I said, yeah. And I always wanted to look him up, but I never did. And about 8 or 9 years went by, and one time I was speaking at an AA convention in North Carolina. People come up afterwards, and this lady came up, and she said, I'd like to introduce myself. And I said, my name is Helen Marseille. And I said, oh, Bill Marseille's wife? She said, no, his widow. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. God. You know, I talked to him, and I was hoping that someday I would look him up. And then I'm suddenly going, what is she doing here? And she said, well, you know, right after you called, and you told him all about how happy you were in AA, he joined AA. And he had 5 years sobriety when he died of a heart attack, and he always was talking about you. So that puts the ninth step in perspective. There's a much bigger plan going on than just going through and having to go see these people. This is a spiritual lesson that we're being taught by doing this. And so we're going to take this list from the 8th step, and we're going to do this with a sponsor. We're going to go through this list, and we're going to say, what do you think? Should I start approaching these people yet? Should I talk to my mother yet? Should I write a letter? What about the people that I owe money to? What should I do? And we look in there, and we go in our literature, and we find the suggested way of doing this is to tell the truth. And this is written back in, 1939. And Bill is saying, even back then, they would call up creditors and say, we are alcoholics and we're recovering. And part of my program of staying sober is getting a hold of you to acknowledge that I owe that $1,000 and I want to make the best possible terms. Well, back then, nobody heard of alcoholism. You would say, well, the guy's probably going to throw you in jail. But they didn't. They listened, and the debts were paid back. And this gives us the freedom from this past that is haunting us. That's what the ninth step is all about, is to give us freedom from that past. These are the people we don't want to run into. We see, there's the guy across the street. Duck down there. Is he gone yet? Oh, wow, I don't want to run into him. Now we're going to voluntarily run into him. We're going to walk over there and say, Mr. Jones, I really want to talk to you. I worked in your company for many years. I was the worst employee you ever had. I feel terrible about it. I know all the stuff I did. I just want to look you in the eye and tell you if I was working there now, I'd be a much better person, and you were a good boss, and I just regret deeply what happened, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is a fairly straightforward thing. We will not, however, make these amends if it's going to harm anybody else. We're not going to tell someone of an affair that they don't know about and ruin their lives just so that we can go, well, I'm glad to get that off my back. That's been bugging me for a long time. So we cannot enhance our own well-being at the expense of others, and so we use a sponsor. And we talk about these things, and we become willing to do every one of these amends, even if it involves going to jail. We have to, because that is what the program is all about. It is being willing. Willingness is being spiritual. Willful is not being spiritual. And anything that we do that cuts off our access to our higher power puts us in jeopardy of taking a drink. So all of this has to do with achieving this daily spiritual reprieve from our disease of alcoholism. And so we talk to our sponsor, and we come up with a plan. And one of the things that I have found very useful, especially when we're going to see people that we're frightened of, people that may have treated us badly, we're going to have to work before we go there and make sure that we have forgiven them, make sure that we're only going to talk about our side of the street. It does little good to go in and say to a guy, I'm so sorry I punched you in the nose, but you said all those stupid things and I had to. That is just not going to do anything. We're there just to look at our behavior. So anything that imagined or real that we think about the other person, we got to forgive. We talk to our sponsor. We're there off the hook. We're not there to straighten them out. We are simply there to do the correct thing. This is what a spiritual person does. And we see in step 10, we're going to be doing it on a daily basis. We're going to do it as soon as we can. When we're wrong, promptly admit it. Here we're coming in years later. But this is where the promises come in. Oh, one thing I want to say, and I'm going to read the promise and comment them on very briefly. I may run over about 2 minutes. After talking it over with your sponsor, you have the plan, the timetable, when you're going to contact people, how you're going to do it, and it may be intimidating. And Bill writes in here, we do not go in servile and scraping. We are God's children. We are there doing a godly mission. And so before you go in the ladies' room or the men's room and get your little 24-hour day book or a Serenity Prayer card, read a couple prayers off of it, and take your higher power in. Sort of just ask God. Say, God, would you go with me while I go in and talk about this? And the secretary said, yes. He'd say, would you tell Mr. Brown that we're here to see him? And we go in with great dignity. We're just in there because this is the correct thing to do. And it matters not if we are greeted with great enthusiasm and told what great heroes we are to stop drinking, or if he throws us out in the street and says, you're a bum and you always will be one. The job is over. We have now completed that. And it's a wonderful feeling. And I'm going to just comment on a couple of the promises. We're going to do new freedom and new happiness. And this is new. New freedom and new happiness. Not the alcohol happiness, not the excitement. This is going to be a happiness about ourselves. We are free from the confines of our old ideas, and we're happy to be in our own skin. We're happy with ourselves. Why? Because we just did something that we swore we'd never do. I didn't think I would ever be able to go straighten that out. I thought I was going to have to live with that for the rest of my life. We're going to do a new freedom and new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. Matter of fact, we're going to see that our past, as long as you stay sober, is the secret weapon that you have to save another alcoholic's life. That horrible past that you were so ashamed of is the one thing that the new alcoholic will listen. Oh yeah, I've been in jail too. Oh yeah, I hid the bottle back there. Yeah, my wife left me. Oh yeah. And now I've changed all that. Now you will listen, and they will listen to us when they'll listen to no one else. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. Serenity and peace were not words that we ever even heard of. We only knew excitement and depression and anxiety. Those were our specialties. Serenity and peace, what is that? And we suddenly find this is a spiritual state of great significance. We're going to know a feeling of serenity and be at peace. The conflict and turmoil that we thought was permanent inside of us, that we're just going to have to endure for the rest of our lives, shows signs of receding. No matter how far down the scale we've gone, we'll see how our experience can benefit others. That's what I just talked about. This past is now a very useful part of us, and we share it from the podium, at meetings, one-on-one, and it is a way of connecting with other human beings who, like ourselves, are not perfect, even though we pretend that we are, and we make a connection at a much deeper level. Feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. That all ties into the same theme. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. This is the ultimate freedom that we talked about earlier. When self-seeking starts drifting off. Now, why would self-seeking start drifting off? Why would we lose interest in ourselves and gain interest in our fellows? Because something, some power is taking care of us so that we don't need to go out and gather more money and all this stuff to take care of us. Our needs are suddenly being met from the inside out, and we're free to go give to others. God is taking care of us in a way we never dreamed was possible. Fear of people of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. It doesn't say that money came into our lives and cured fear of economic insecurity. Fear of economic insecurity left us when we realized that we just have to live a day at a time. It says, give us this day our daily bread. It doesn't say, and $2,000 in the bank. It's just so, as long as we're being taken care of today, that's our focus. And so this need for all this stuff. So what happens? Our demands had been pushed down. We suddenly don't demand $250,000 in the bank in order to be happy today. We got a nice plate of spaghetti at Bella's, and that's about all that matters. I'm going to tell you that. And there's some people in this room that'll vouch for me along those lines. And when the realization comes in, and it often happens as we make these amends because it's such a hands-on with other people type experience, we start to realize that something, and we can end up calling it God or higher power, spirit of the universe, whatever you want, something is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. And that sets us up. As soon as we have that awareness, we are ready for the next 3 steps, where we learn how to live a day at a time, and we learn how to improve our conscious contact through prayer and meditation. We're at the end of the time. Let's stand in place, say the Lord's Prayer, and then wrap it up as quick as we can.